Good morning, everybody. I'm Paul May, I'm the chair of this committee, and welcome this morning. It is a meeting that's recorded and it will be available to the public to see. And I just wanted to start off by saying we've had acceptances today from Councillor Kent, me, Councillor Riddle, I think Onkar is not here yet, Wilcox and Williams. So thank you very much. But we've had apologies from Councillor Connolly, Mohammed and Stansfield. So just move on. Oh, and of course David, the independent member, is with us, as I was going to say as always, but thank you. Right, the emergency evacuation procedure.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. If the event of a fire alarm does go off and there's no planned fire alarm test this morning, then we'll go down the stairs to the canteen, and then we've got a choice of turning left or right at the bottom of the stairs to the nearest exit. Thank you.
Luke. And declarations of interest. I've got one small declaration of interest, and that is I went through the system because my fire alarms at home had run out of their lifetime, and the response was really quick and very, very efficient. And I just thought we got reference to home visits in the document, but it's really interesting when it actually happens to you. It's nice to see the effectiveness of the organisation. So thank you to everybody for that. So just move on a little bit beyond that. Any other declarations of interest?
No,
can't see any. Public access. There's no public access statements. There are seats there, so there's no public here today that I can see. So I want to welcome you all to the meeting. To confirm that this is the Audit, Governance and Oversight meeting, and it's taking place at the headquarters of the Fire and Police Authority, and it is recorded for the public to view on the Fire Authority YouTube channel. I'm going to ask the members to introduce themselves, if we could, please. So start with you, David.
Councillor David Wilcox, representing Lockleys Ward in the fine City and County of Bristol.
Tim Kent, Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Ward, Bristol City Council.
Good morning, Councillor Matthew Riddle, Severn Vale Ward, South Gloucestershire Council.
Good morning, I'm David Powell, I'm the independent member of the committee.
And I'm Paul May. I'm a councillor for Bath and North East Somerset, and I represent the villages of Pensford and Whitchurch Village in Baines. Right, so the officers, can we have the officers introduce themselves? Start with you, Luke.
Yeah, good morning, councillors. Good morning, colleagues. Luke Gazzard, Assistant Chief Fire Officer for Service Delivery.
Good morning, councillors. Good morning, members. And I am Matt Kirk, Chief Fire Officer for Avon Fire and Rescue Service.
Good morning, Helen Dunbarton, Corporate Assurance and Planning Manager.
Hello, Lorna Wynne-Yates, Corporate Risk Advisor.
Morning, Nicola Cooper, Employee Relations Lead.
Morning everyone, Becky Yates, Health, Safety and Welfare Manager.
And good morning, councillors and colleagues. I'm Simon Flood and I'm Performance Manager.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Quinton. I'm the manager responsible for prevention and protection.
Good morning, Emma Bowen, Democratic Services.
Good morning, Paula Lyons, Assistant Chief Fire Officer, Portfolio.
Good morning, I'm Verity Truscott, Statutory Finance Officer.
Good morning, Zoe Coombs, Clerk and Monitoring Officer.
So thank you very much, everybody, and welcome. I just want to remind everybody that the normal voting that we would do is we would do any votes against. Have I missed somebody?
Yeah, just the auditors, sorry.
Oh, sorry. We don't take any notice of the auditors. Sorry.
Good morning, Jodie Brummel from Swap and Tender Audit.
Morning everyone, I'm David Broughton from RSM.
I did say good morning to them earlier on, so apologies for that. So thank you very much. And the voting, there's only one item for voting today, that's going to be the minutes, but we'll take it in the normal way where we say any votes against, any abstentions, and then any votes for. So hopefully the minutes will be quite sensible You're going to tell us about RSM paper?
Yes, certainly. I'm going to just advise that the RSM paper has been brought as the first item following the approval of minutes on the agenda, so that then it allows David to leave if he wishes to do so. The other thing, just to remind everybody, is please use your microphones when speaking and remember to turn them off. It's important that the microphones are turned on when speaking, so that then all discussion's captured and it's on the recording. Okay.
Thank you, Zoe.
Then the other thing, just to advise everybody there, ordinarily we would look to elect a vice chair at the first meeting of the committee for the 26-27 year, but as we have not yet held the annual general meeting of the Fire Authority, which will officially start the municipal year, we are unable to proceed to elect a vice chair of this committee today, so we will do that at the next meeting of this committee later in the year. The other reminder that I have, please, is that on the desks of certain people in the room, there is a register of interest forms and other forms. If I could ask those that please be completed and returned to Emma. And on the 2nd of June, there were instructions that accompanied those forms sent by way of an email. But as I say, there are some blank forms on the desks for those who may require them today. So thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Very much, Zoe. At this stage, as chair, I want to invite Matt just to give an update. This is the first formal meeting since the HMI inspection, and I think it would be appropriate for him, please, to give us a brief update of how we think we're doing.
Thank you very much, Chair. Forgive me, I can't quite see down this side of the table, so apologies I'm not looking directly at you, but it's an absolute key moment for Avon Fire and Rescue Service that on Wednesday I was contacted by His Majesty's Inspectorate for Constabulary Fire and Rescue Services to inform me that Avon Fire and Rescue Service has been taken out of enhanced monitoring after more than 2 years of being enhanced monitoring. Now, this is a key moment for the service and for the communities that we serve, and it's an absolute proud moment for me as Chief Fire Officer. So there's a couple of kind of key aspects to the being removed from enhanced monitoring. It coincides with the release of our latest inspection report, and it illustrates the significant improvement that we've made as a fire and rescue service. So since I joined around about April of last year, we have closed 2 accelerated causes of concern, one for site-specific risk information, one for mobilising. We've also closed a cause of concern for culture within the service. We have 1 outstanding cause of concern remaining, but I will caveat with its 1 recommendation which links to increasing resources within the prevention team. We've already taken action to increase resources within that area, and progress is being made daily within our prevention teams. There is also within the report, you will see that out of the total 19 out of the 31 AFIs from the original inspection have been closed. We've got no new causes of concern and only 8 new AFIs. 5 of the judgment areas have improved, 2 of these by 2 grades, and we've got 4 judgment areas that remain the same and a single judgment that has dropped slightly. So not only is it important that we've come out of enhanced monitoring, but also our inspection report demonstrates the significant improvements been delivered across the service. There is areas of improvement that have been identified, so we're not complacent in that position, and we're already developing plans to make those improvements as part of the action plan, and that's a natural cycle of any inspection report. But what it does illustrate is that we've improved and we're no longer in enhanced monitoring. That's a critical moment for us as a service. I would also say a huge thank you to my service leadership board, my service leadership team, and there's officers in this room today, and the whole organisation. There is not a single part of this organisation that hasn't lent into that continuous improvement journey, and I could not be prouder as Chief Fire Officer for the work that has been done by officers across our fire and rescue service. I'd also say a huge thank you to members for your leadership, your scrutiny, and holding me to account as Chief Fire Officer on that improvement journey. We need that scrutiny, and I thank you for your leadership. Ultimately, the report illustrates that we are delivering an efficient and effective fire and rescue services for the communities that we serve, and our absolute primary focus is to keep people safe in their homes and in our communities. And the report illustrates, yes, we have improvements, and we'll absolutely lean into those improvements and make those improvements, but what it demonstrates is that we are on a continuous improvement journey that is heading in the right direction. So I could not be proud as Chief Fire Officer, and ultimately I exist to serve Avon Fire and Rescue Service so that we can serve our communities effectively and efficiently. Thank you, Chair.
I don't really know what to say apart from leadership is absolutely essential, but it's the leadership of a team, and that team is obviously delivering for you, Matt, and I think great credit to everybody in this room and the rest of the officers who got within the Fire Authority. It's been a difficult time for the Fire Authority, and I think it's really great news to hear what you've announced today. So I apologise for slipping that in, but I did think it was really important as our first public meeting to make sure you got that opportunity to say that. And of course, next week you'll be saying the same again, but we got in early, so thank you. I'm just picking up Zoe's point. This might be my last meeting as chair because the next week is the annual meeting, and I've asked to stand again as the chair because I've learnt an awful lot, and I think it's been really important for me to actually understand how the system works, and the support I've had as the vice chair of the authority and chair of this committee has been absolutely enormous, and a big thank you to everybody for that. And I've asked to stand again. Whether I get through or not, that's going to be up to democracy. I just also want to say that the flooding that took place 2 days ago, was it? That I had a report from the Red team in Bath and North East Somerset, who said to me, without knowing I was on the Fire Authority, how wonderful the Fire Authority had been in support of a number of properties that were flooded so badly, and of course you had the very difficult fire in North Bristol. So I thought it was really nice to actually hear somebody just say, without any prompting, what a good job the Fire Authority were doing and how supportive they were of our communities. So I just wanted to mention that. And I think we brought the agenda forward for you, David, so that when that's over you can leave quite happily if you can find your way out okay. Right, so let's move on then through the agenda. So the minutes of the previous meeting are on the 12th of March. Can I have a seconder? A proposer first, and then a seconder. Thank you. Yep. Right, so this is the one item we've got to vote on today. So can we then just make sure then we can vote for this? Anybody wants to vote against? Anybody wish to abstain? So can we then say that the rest are going to vote for? Simon?
That's it.
So, yeah, okay, thank you. Right, so we then start off with the internal audit report. The last meeting I thanked RSM for their support that they've given to this authority and the scrutiny they've done. And this report is picking up the pensions issue and also an annual report, final report. So can I hand over to you, David?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And morning, everyone. Really good to actually see you all face to face. For those that don't know me, I'm David Broughton, partner at RSM. I lead our risk practice in the South. And my predecessor, Mark Jones, has been your head of internal audit for a number of years, but he retired in March. So it's been quite a brief stint for me, to be honest. But it is really good to meet you all. In terms of today, as you just said, Paul, it's really closing down all of our work from 2025-26 from that audit plan, of which there's only one report that hasn't yet come through to this committee, and that's the pensions report. And then our annual report, which includes a summary of all the work that we've done during the year, and my head of internal audit opinion on governance, risk and internal control. So if I start with the pensions report, this was a very specific piece of work. It's not a controls-based audit with an opinion in. It was agreed upon procedures. It was really using our pensions team to check the veracity of the pensions calculation. So last year in 2025, Avon Fire transitioned to a new pensions provider. And what our pensions team did essentially was take quite a large sample of 111 people across 3 different pension schemes: the Fire 2015 scheme, the LGPS 50/50 scheme, and the LGPS scheme. and just worked those through and really made sure that they were calculating the contributions correctly. So really kind of kicking the tyres and testing the numbers. Very quick, you'll see it's a short report, really positive. There are a number of queries that came through as our pension team worked it through, and the team at Avon Fire were able to kind of work with us to resolve all of those queries, but all of those queries were resolved. So there's no actions in this report. It's a really clean bill of health, so a really good news story, I think, for this committee.
Thank you. Anybody got any queries?
You noted it was a good report, but of the 111, I think it's 42 discrepancies were found. I mean, that is concerning, isn't it? And also, are you able to comment on whether or not that might be a data discrepancy issue that might affect other areas? Thanks.
So, yes, there were 42 discrepancies in the kind of initial sifting, but they were all resolved then with the team at Avon Fire. So, looking at the calculations that Capita had, they were correct. So, in all cases, the actual contributions that had been made by employees was correct. I can't speak if it's signalling more broadly around data integrity.
Chair, may I just...
Yes, of course. Follow up. That's a really quite significant percentage, though, of the sample, isn't it? I guess the good thing that you said is that it doesn't appear to have affected individual employees in terms of their contributions, in terms of on the pension, for the pension scheme. However, you know, as an audit committee, we ought to be thinking, hang on a minute, this may be worth further investigation. Would you care to comment on that as you leave your seat as the internal auditor?
Yeah, so if you look in the detailed findings of the report, we've highlighted exactly what those 42 exceptions were, and it's generally where the information that was held here didn't quite agree to the information that was held by Capita. But Capita was the real information, and that was correct. Yeah. So from that point of view, there's nothing that transferred into actual incorrect payments or contributions. I would have to go back and kind of isolate why they were different. But I think part of the exercise that we completed was to able to kind of, I guess, address some of those discrepancies and help that dialogue.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted...
Thank you. Verity first, then you.
If I can, sorry, Chair, if I can just close that off. I mean, this is quite a significant discrepancy level, and I think as a committee, irrespective of whether or not you return as Chair, it might be something worth us reviewing in the future. This is a high level of discrepancy, although we've been reassured by the internal auditor that there isn't anything of significance within there in terms of the impact. But I think we should just note that in the minutes, if we may, please.
And of course, we've also got, I was going to say your colleague, but I'm sure we can pick that up. But Verity first, and then I'll come over to you.
Yeah, I think just coming in on those discrepancies, I think it was around the information that we gave to RSM. I think within that there wasn't enough detail on some of them to confirm whether an element was pensionable or not, or whether we'd given the full information. So when they calculated things, they didn't quite have all the facts. And then when we went through those, we realised that was the case, and kind of that's how they got resolved. A lot of them were kind of around the information that we'd given, not quite providing RSM with what they needed to make the right assumptions to kind of match the contributions of Capita, if that makes sense. And I absolutely take your point and agree it's something that we should continue to look at, because the pensions scheme rules change regularly, and we have seen another change since that audit has taken place in terms of the firefighter pension bandings and things. So we do need to make sure that the payroll system is set up to administer those contributions correctly going forward. So something we will take away and continue to consider what the right level of assurance is to be sure that we've got those correct going forwards.
Thank you, Verity. Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. Another way of looking at this is, in your experience, is that level of issues that were found, is that quite common in other public bodies or other bodies you audit, or were you surprised, given your experience of other organisations, that this was high?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important to note that these discrepancies, as just been described, were around, I guess, the amount of information that was provided for our team to then take the right view. So, for example, where employees have more than one role, we needed to dig further to find out if that pension was being treated accurately, which it was in all of the cases. So it's, yes, you're seeing 41 discrepancies as a high number, but actually they were all resolved.
Thank you. Can I just, you did a paper at the end, which I think you called sort of a briefing paper around emergency services, which I found really quite interesting. And I thought it was really quite nice to actually have that wider context about how emergency services all work together. So thank you for that, and possibly for the future, hopefully we can get a similar report from our internal auditors moving forward. I just wanted to pick up on page 54 of our papers about on-call firefighters. It's an issue I think that's quite relevant to us moving forward, and I'll be having a discussion with Luke at some stage in the future about whether we actually think about that moving forward in the future. So can I take the opportunity of thanking RSM for what they've done for this fire authority. You've always been very open and very helpful, and we do feel really scrutinised by what you've done for us. So thank you very much, and I'll say cheerio.
Thank you.
Thank
Still
you.
got our annual report to go.
Pardon?
Can I just quickly talk you through our annual report, because it's got the head of internal audit opinion in. So, so the final report from us is our annual report, which essentially ties to ties together all the work that we did during the year, but it also includes the head of internal audit opinion on governance, risk and internal control. What I would say about the opinion is obviously that opinion is limited to the work that we do during the year. We delivered 5 pieces of work during 25-26, so we have a relatively narrow window into the organisation, so our opinion is limited to that work. But all of the work that we deliver, whether it's assurance-based, and 4 out of those 5 audits had an assurance opinion in there, with the final one being pensions that we've just discussed, or advisory work also feeds into our overall understanding of governance, risk and control. And then finally, attendance at meetings such as this, where we see governance and risk live in action. So all of that feeds into our opinion. When we step back and look at the work that we've delivered during the year, actually 3 of our 4 assurance opinions were reasonable, so positive assurance with a number of findings in there just to continuously drive improvement. The stocks and stores management, which I know was discussed at length at this committee, we gave partial assurance, but a number of the findings that we raised in there have already been actioned and implemented. So when I stood back and actually looked at the portfolio of work, I thought the opinion that we provided was actually quite clear, which is the second highest out of the 4 annual opinions that we give. And that opinion is that Avon Fire and Rescue has an adequate and effective framework for risk management, governance and internal control. However, the work that we've delivered has identified further enhancements to that framework of risk management, governance and internal control to ensure that it remains adequate and effective. So essentially, what we're saying is that you've got a robust control environment from the audits that we've delivered during the year, but we have highlighted in each of those some areas to continue to drive improvement, to just make sure that controls remain effective. It's pretty clearly in that box, to be honest. When I stood back, it's sometimes with annual opinions, they can be closer to one than the other, but actually this one was very clear from my perspective. So happy to take questions on that, Chair.
Okay, so I think we'll move on then. Thank you very much, David, for your report.
Thank you all, and thank you for the support that you've worked with RSM for quite a number of years now, and I know the team over the years have really enjoyed working with you, so thank you very much and best of luck.
And all my feedback is that we've enjoyed working with you, so thank you very much. Okay, so over to you, Simon. If you can just introduce yourself again for the recording, and with Stephen as well, please. So thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again, colleagues and councillors. I'm Simon Flood. I'm Performance Manager for Avon Fire and Rescue Service. So what we're talking about today is our performance report. It's looking at the complete financial year for April 25 to March 26. So unlike with our normal reports that we bring to the AGOC meeting, where we look at the performance measures that are off target, and then we bring to you recommendations from the metric owner to say, are we planning to treat or tolerate the risk and give you, if we are planning to treat what we're planning to do to treat it. Well, with this report, it's looking at a financial year that is finished, so there is nothing, if you like, that we can do now to influence or mitigate the performance. The performance period has finished. So what it's basically doing is giving an oversight of where we've met target and where we haven't met target, and a little bit of information about about what we're planning to do in future to try and get ourselves on target of things where we have missed target. As usual, the report is supported by usually 2 appendices, and this time there's a 3rd appendix. So Appendix 1 is our corporate scorecard, which lists all of the corporate metrics that we measure, linked under our 2 key objectives of creating a safer community and a stronger service, and then also sublinked under our 6 key commitments, which is to be good at prevention, protection, response, resilience, resources and people. So all the metrics are linked in that way. It's also supported by Appendix 2, which is a subset of those same metrics, but also in a more graphic format, and we produce these for each of our stations and we send them out, and Emma sends them out to members currently for your information. So there's one of these produced at Avon level and also one produced at each station, including our control team, and it just gives us, say, the same information but just in a more graphic format. What we've also got on a report this year is looking at the performance metrics that we have agreed to measure for for the current financial year. So those members who attended the members' briefing a couple of months ago, we gave a presentation about how we come to this decisions about what we're planning to metric, and I assure you there's a lot of communication and discussion about what are the appropriate things for us to measure, and really what we're trying to do is to say that if what we measure is all showing as green and on target, then we can be satisfied that we have an effective fire and rescue service. So we need to make sure that the measures that we're choosing to measure give us that reassurance, because if we're measuring the wrong thing, then we could potentially say we're performing well, but we're not measuring the right things that we need to understand. So just a little bit of information about that. And as I say, where the performance period has come to an end, usually we ask members to agree with our recommendations to either treat or tolerate the risk. But for this report, because the performance period has come to an end, really we're asking members to note the contents of the report and also to note the recommendations or what we're planning to measure for the next financial year. So if I can move on to page 62 in your pack, which is where we start going through the individual performance areas. The first thing, we made reference in paragraph 5.1 to our annual performance report. We have very nearly finished that, so it should be finished in the next few days. We publish it on our internet site, and what I'll ask Emma to do is, once that's available, if we could send that round to members just to notify them that it is available with the link to it. But it gives some further information and insight to each of our performance metrics, how we've performed over the year, if we're off target, what we're planning to do for the next year, and that will be published in the next few days, we're hopeful. So overall performance, I suggest is relatively good. We use the normal red, amber, green method of showing whether things are on target or off target. And if I could refer you back to the scorecard, you can see that the vast majority of the metrics that we're measuring are showing green and showing us on target. So it's 59% of the metrics are showing on target, and a further 7, which is 22%, are just off target and showing amber, and only 6 of our metrics, which is 19%, are showing as red. So it's a relatively strong performance period that will report that we're bringing to you. If we could, the other thing I just wanted to say with that is I make reference in the paper, and this will be included in a bit more detail in the annual performance report, but for people who have had a fire or an emergency incident we've attended and also been recipient of a home fire safety visit, we do send out to a subset of those people a customer satisfaction form. So this is all managed by an independent research company who we appoint to do this work for us. So we send it out, and it asks all sorts of things about people's satisfaction with the service that we provide. And one of the questions for people who've had an emergency incident we've attended is their overall satisfaction with our performance at that incident. And I'm very pleased to report that 93% of the respondents were very satisfied with the performance of Avon Fire and Rescue Service at the emergency incident. So I think it kind of supports some of the stuff that Matt has said this morning, and also Paul has said with regard to the performance of the fire service, that we can measure, but when we actually go out to the public and say, what did you think about the service we provided, the results we get back are very good. But so there'll be further information about that in the performance report that should be published any day. So looking at the prevention areas, we were off target for 2 of our 4 fire metrics, and I've included, particularly for the deliberate primary fires, I've included a little snippet from the performance monitors, the target tracker of that one, and it shows basically we're off target due to some high numbers of fires that occurred at the start of the year when the weather was particularly hot, which does have an impact upon our performance, or the number of fires that we have. And that is reiterated in paragraph 5.4, where we've got some information that's provided to us by the government with regard to National Fire Service statistics that's showing that there's an increase in the 12 months to the end of December compared to the previous 12 months, a 6.8% increase in fires. So it's not something that was unique to Avon Fire and Rescue Service, it is something that's impacted across the country with the number of fires that we've been having. And part of our plan...
Simon, can I just ask a question there?
Yes,
is that something we need to be addressing as a committee moving forward? Because it does look as though with global warming, etc., that's likely to be a pattern that replicates.
It's certainly something we need to keep our eye upon to make sure we're resourcing effectively with regard to risk, and it's something we're investing a lot in our community risk management programme to making sure that we have got that correct.
Yeah, if I may as well, Chair, you're absolutely right. That's something that's very at the forefront of, certainly from a prevention and protection perspective, and linking in with our operational colleagues. And as you'll notice in the paper as well, we do have our heat trigger plan for hot weather, and we're currently going through that at the moment. We started to enact some of that when we hit certain temperatures, and that is around that prevention, that proactive community engagement, identifying hotspots, and ensuring that we link in with our partners to make sure that where we identify certain risks, we report that to local authorities so things can be removed, and we share that information, so we utilise those partners to prevent that from becoming an incident. So there's always going to be certain types of incidents that we can't control in hot weather, but we are at the forefront now. And again, as Simon's articulated, it is a national problem, and we link in with the National Fire Chiefs Council. We've only recently had some communication around wildfires. Now we don't suffer wildfires in their truest sense in the Avon area, but we do have a lot of rural areas where we see grass fires, which are quite large. They don't meet that threshold for a wildfire. But we utilise specialist assets that we have, and obviously national partners through the Fire Chiefs Council to help us deal with those and prepare for those incidents. So we are, it is a challenge for us, but certainly Area Manager Osborne and his ops teams are certainly up for that challenge and are already proactive in their response to it. So.
From the tool, thank you. Excuse me. So, also under prevention, we've got some information about some of the key interventions that we do to try and mitigate risk. And one of the key ones for that, particularly for accidental dwelling fires, because that is the area where we see the highest risk of fatality in fire incidents, is accidents in the home. So we complete home fire safety visits to try and mitigate that risk. We finished the year just off target for the volume that we were looking to achieve, but some good information on that. In paragraph 5.6, I put some information that we get from the government about the home fire safety visits that are completed to people who are most at risk in our community. And I've just snipped a little bit of the graph in there that they produce in the data they give to us. And it shows that we compare favourably. The Avon figure is the red one within there in the bar. For the percentage of the home fire safety visits that we complete that are to the people who are most at risk, ours is 93%. So it compares quite favourably to other fire and rescue service, and we're quite proud of that. It means that the work that we're doing is targeted to those who are most at risk within our community. The other thing I just wanted to say about completion of home fire safety visits, it is something we do our customer satisfaction surveys for, and I'm pleased to report that 96% of people who'd had a home fire safety visit, including perhaps yourself, Councillor, were very satisfied with the service that they've received, and there was 0% of people who were not satisfied with the service they've received. So very pleased to be able to report that, and as I say, there'll be further information about that in the report.
Okay, if we take questions as we go along, Simon. Matthew?
I think it's helpful to take questions if you can going along, otherwise you forget what you want to ask. Yeah, a very good response, obviously good experience that the chair's had. In terms of the numbers, is the issue about the number of referrals coming forward, or is it about capacity to actually do the visits once the referrals come through? I'm just interested about the dynamics of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Riddell. In a way, it's a bit of both, and I think it's. I think the positive journey, and I've been sat in front of members before, and we talked about our target and how we used to set our target, and how we've become much more mature in how we're now setting the targets, and that's why we've been really open and transparent around our key performance indicators and the local performance indicators for this coming year, or the current year, around what we want to measure. We historically set that target on what we believed was a capacity, and I've mentioned that before, and actually we're now more mature in that actually that was wrong. So it's not the issue of number of referrals coming in. We are seeing year on year now increased referrals. It was around utilising our workforce in the most appropriate way, and that's our operational workforce. And what we've seen since around about September, October last year, we've seen a horrendously brilliant increase in the number of home fire safety visits that have been carried out and post-incident activity carried out by our crews. And that's been welcomed by the HMI, and they've acknowledged that increase. There has been some challenges around resilience within the specialist prevention team, and that's one of the areas that the HMI identified, which we've now resourced. There's very little resilience in that team, so yes, if somebody is off sick, there's nobody sat there waiting to pick that work up, because some of those are specialist visits. So that increase in prevention will provide that resilience, and for this year we've set a more intuitive target and a much more appropriate target, which is based on risk, but also still is based on that capacity, because we have a finite resource. And that's where the pleasing bit is that of those 93% of visits, we are to highest risk people, so they're most vulnerable. So that's the positive. But again, I'm going to be singing positive about my teams. We again positively did more home fire safety visits last year than we did the previous year. So we have seen since 2020 an increase year on year. So as we become smarter, and without embarrassing the chair contacted me to say, how do I go about updating my smoke alarms? And we gave two options, and it was really good that Councillor May went through the referral process. He didn't pull rank, didn't say, can you sort me a favour? He went through the process. My teams that received that didn't know who Councillor May was. And actually, so it's really nice to see how that system works, and it's a bit of a comfort it worked quite well, otherwise I'd have been quite embarrassed sat here if it hadn't. But it, yeah.
Be the 1%.
So it was like a bit of a secret shopper. It was brilliant, but I knew it was happening, which could have gone horribly wrong. But I think that's the real positive. And then the customer satisfaction survey as well is showing that the service that we are providing is value for money. It's hitting the most target vulnerable. What we just need to do, and this is why we've been open this year, is be more transparent, more open, more honest with ourselves around what we can achieve, and really focus on that, which I believe we are this year. So I've gone on a lot there, but hopefully that's answered your question.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to delve more into the findings of the HMICRFS report in terms of the fact that they were disappointed that we hadn't applied enough resources into the home prevention team. So you talked about resilience in there, which is good, but by what factor have you increased the resilience, and how much will this be enough to please HMI for their next report, please?
Thank you. So as part of their, and it's a really, really good question, that's one that's made me go a little bit greyer over the years, but I think what's important is when the HMI first raised that back in the inspection 23, we did move one resource already across from our children and young persons team into our vulnerable adults team and our community safety team. So they were pleased that we'd started that, but recognised because of that resilience and the numbers, we needed to do more. What we've now done, as I say, our team of community safety workers, our specialist workers, they go to the highest risk people in their multi-agency visits. they do a number of visits per day, and as I say, and if they're not there, then those visits don't get done. So what we've now identified is, based on what we believe we can service we can provide, without dropping in standards, we believe what we've proposed in an increase in the department is sufficient to be able to meet the target and provide that resilience. And certainly through my conversations throughout the interview process, and it's a challenging process with the HMR in those interviews, from my perspective, they seem very happy with the proposals and also the increase in our operational staff carrying out visits. They seem quite happy, and if I reflect on the process we've been through with our protection department over the years in the HMI, we followed a very similar stance, and it's evidence-led increase, because yes, I would love to sit there and say to the bosses, I want 20 staff, please. And however, it's about utilising the most efficient way and value. They seem quite happy with the proposal, and I think that's the positive thing. I think the challenge is it was just around timing, and sadly the HMI report in a certain way with their figures on at the time when the inspection, it's not current up-to-date data. Otherwise, it would have painted a significantly different picture and a much more positive picture with the numbers that we've received. So the target is a stretch target, because we believe we want to get to that point, because we want to increase year on year, but we believe it might go a little bit more. But we're managing expectations around that, because we have to factor that in. But yeah, I'm pretty confident that they're happy with the proposal. It's just around timing, and if this had come 6 months later, I think they would have closed that cause of concern sooner. So.
Thank you. Matt?
Heartening to hear. Can I ask a supplemental? To what extent are you going to be using whole-time firefighters? Because the HMI report does mention that.
Yep, absolutely. There we have whole-time firefighters. I was going to embarrass myself with the numbers now, but we've got a significant number of whole-time firefighters. And what we identified last year was that they were missing opportunities to really drill. They're always doing home fire safety visits, and we balanced that across their training and all their other work and their protection work. We will continue to use those. They are a key element of our front-facing members of staff who are. We follow the principles of making every contact count. So every incident we go to, we will do post-incident activity, because there's vulnerable people, whether that be we gained access for somebody because somebody can't get in, or they're vulnerable behind the door, or whether that's a fire. We will continue to use those, and we will continue to monitor the performance of those to ensure that we are maximising that opportunity. So, and then obviously linking that in with the partnership work, making sure that we dovetail that to increase that capacity, because we do have a finite resource, we do have a finite amount of time. What the HMI are very clear on is that the service we provide needs to be to the benefit of the individual. It shouldn't be based on when we can do it, it's when the members of the public need it. And we've become much smarter at that with how we manage the working day, the changes we've made to the working day around the flexibility around crews and what they do at certain times, but also ensuring that that visit is effectively customer-led as opposed to when it's convenient for us. So, yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. Matt?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Just to build on what Steve has spoken about. So obviously from a departmental level, using the resources that Steve has to try and maximise the ability for us to increase our home fire safety visit delivery, but it goes beyond the department. So what's happened is it was raised to us as a service leadership board through a business case to see how we can free up resources in another part of the organisation to then reinforce resources and improve resources to increase resilience. So resourcing to risk is a term we use. Obviously, given some of the financial constraints that we've seen previously in the organisation, which we've spoken about at Fire Authority, we need to make sure that we could affordably and sustainably increase the resources. So we've been able to sign off that business case, and we've increased the resources within the team, and that's an ongoing process at a department level. We've also made decisions at a corporate level to make sure that we are using our resources effectively, so not only within our specialist prevention team but also within our whole-time firefighters. And we've seen, based on the data, that if you compare last year to the previous year, we've seen, I think it's 100% increase in the number of home fire safety visits delivered by whole-time firefighters, and also, as Steve has indicated, an increase in our central team. So the additional resources within the central team will deliver extra resilience. Obviously we need to track that to make sure that performance is embedded and sustained, and also we've made a decision that whole-time firefighters will be carrying out home fire safety visits for high-risk, vulnerable members of the public. So it's not just about the numbers, it's also about the quality and targeting vulnerable members of our communities, because the strategic outcome we want to achieve is a reduction in fire deaths and fire injuries, which you'll see within the scorecard is central to that metric. So obviously the report has maintained that specific recommendation, which is around looking to make sure there's enough resources within our prevention to carry out all activity, and also to explore whether whole-time firefighters or fire stations can do more. So we've delivered that work. Now we need to see that work is having a tangible increase in outputs and strategic outcomes. Hence why the cause of concern remains open. I attended FBOG Fire Performance and Oversight Group last week, sat in front of His Majesty's Inspectorate, articulated what our plan is to address that recommendation within that cause of concern. They were satisfied. They've made a decision to take us out of enhanced monitoring. We will then have a revisit from His Majesty's Inspectorate to focus specifically on that recommendation, to make sure that the work we've done to increase resources and ultimately to support Steve and his department by working integrated across the whole organisation. We hope then to see an increase in our strategic outputs and outcomes.
Thank you. We need to push on. Just one thing to end it. In terms of the visit that was held with me, it was not just the visit and putting up some fire alarms. The lady went around and looked at the electrics in my house, so it's the quality of what we do on home visits as well as the numbers. So I think that's a really important thing. And I wasn't given a survey, but I'll leave that for you to think about in the future. David?
Thanks, Joe. Just briefly a question about the policies figure in the resources section. There's some narrative in the report, but that's quite a big gap between the target and the actual for the year. But in the report I note you're talking about the People Services team as being the owner of 30% of the policies. What reassurance can you give the committee that gap will be closed in 26-27, because it's quite considerable? Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, it is something we're aware of, and it's something that we've got good performance information of now, and it appears on our digital scorecard. It is quite, volatile is not the right word, but it does change. So a couple of months back, we were a lot more nearer to target, and then we had quite a few that came out. We're doing work to make sure that the scheduling of them and the frequency of the review is managed better, so they don't all go out of date at the same time. But yeah, a lot of it is the capacity within the People Services team. Did you want to come in on that?
Claire?
Yeah, I was just going to say, obviously a lot of them are sort of being updated at the minute, so hopefully by the sort of next meeting, which I think is in 3 months, we should be in a better position, and hopefully they should all be in date at that point. So like Simon said, hopefully the review dates will be spread out a little bit more, so it's less onerous on sort of one team. Okay.
One brief follow-up. Are we talking about policies of significance, or are they, in your view, policies which are not going to adversely affect the running of the organisation?
I wouldn't say they would adversely affect the running of the organisation. We've got policies that are still in place at the moment, but if there was anything that was going to affect individuals, it's now, like say laws change, for example, then we would make sure we adhere to that anyway, so it wouldn't impact any members of staff. Okay.
Paula?
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, business support sits with me, and we do have some assurance that the process behind the policies is robust. We've changed it, we've improved it, we continuously look at it. So we do have the granular detail of the numbers that are overdue and what those policies are. So they do vary in terms of kind of their risk level, which also informs when we address them. But to give you some assurance, there are only 10 policy reviews due to commence in this financial year. But they have 8 different owners, and that's really going to help this time, because then it's not all in one director or one unit of work undertaking that work. But to just give you some further reassurance, within the business support team, the manager is a business and project manager support. So she's got a project manager background, which has been really helpful. So she's worked really closely with HR and with the teams in that specific area. And some of the things she's done is set up some Teams channels with those policies out of date and looked at the kind of Word versions and how she can assist them in being a bit more efficient and effective in getting these done. And that's using things such as Copilot to help with the documents, setting up something called a Kanban board, which is a project management tool around visual workflows to help with that processing and timelines, and also set up some meetings of which she's asked to attend to also help with managing that organisation of them. So you should hope to see some improvements soon.
Tim, can we just ask that we get on, because we took questions around one part of your report and we sort of drifted off a little bit. So, Tim, can you make your question fairly brief and we'll try and move forward as quickly as we can?
I can, Chair. My question was about a different part of the report, but I thought you were moving us off the report.
Shall we let Simon carry on, and then you ask the question at the appropriate stage? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so I don't plan to go through in detail each of the sections because I think it's written in there. There's just a little bit I want to say about paragraph 5.10, which is about the response information we provide. So we did see an increase in demand upon our service this year. The number of incidents that we attended under emergency circumstances was up by 1%. We set our response standards, and currently what we have is to attend for emergency life risk incidents within an average of 8 minutes, and for emergency non-life risk incidents, which is based upon the information we get when we respond, so what is told to us over the telephone on the 999 call, is to attend on average within 12 minutes, and we meet those response standards. What we also do, though, and we're quite proud that we do this, is we validate our response standards through our customer service satisfaction forms, because we could choose and say, okay, we're going to get you within 8 minutes, but if actually the members of the public, the communities we're serving, think that we should be getting there quicker, then to a certain extent you could say, well, it means that our response standards need to be rethought. But I'm pleased to report that 96% of the respondents of our surveys felt that we arrived quicker than or in line with their expectations. So it does validate, to a certain extent, the response standards that the Fire Authority has set on behalf of the service. So just wanted to make the point upon that. So we've got further information there about some of our performance under the protection. The one area there where we recognise we need to improve is about the completion of the site-specific risk inspections within the target date. We need to get better at that, and we've got plans to do it. We've got information about our sickness information, where again we were just off target this year, and I've got some information about what we're planning to do with regard to that. And we've got information under our resources section where we have a number of metrics about the ones that we've met target and not met target. We've got some information about the target about achieving 50% of our health and safety incidents about near misses, which Becky will probably cover in her performance report on the health and safety a little bit later. And then we've talked about our policies. An area where we do well under paragraph 5.17 is about our personal development reviews. We put a lot of store about this, and our target is to have 95% of them in date, and that is quite a lot higher than most organisations would set. So it's certainly something that we challenge ourselves to make sure that these happen, because we recognise the importance of making sure that everyone is on board with the mission that we're trying to achieve, and that we're developing our staff appropriately. So I'm pleased to report about that one. So I don't think I had anything else that I wanted to highlight with regard to the report, and also conscious that time is moving on. So we're open to any further questions.
So we can take questions now on any part of your report. So back to you, Tim. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the sickness levels, because I know you said we just missed it, but I'd say there was more than just a miss. My concern was that actually it's nearly impossible to hit that target, because if you take a look at the long-term sickness level, that is nearly actually at the level of the total sickness level target. And when I looked at the mitigations, I didn't feel that there were mitigations in it regarding long-term sickness. So I was just wondering if we had broken that down more about why the long-term sickness levels are so high. I wondered, is this something faced by all fire authorities? Is this a recent issue? Is this because, of course, retirement dates have changed for firefighters in the last 10 years? I was sort of wondering really the background behind that.
Thank you, Councillor. The information about the short and long-term sickness is on Appendix 2 on the target tracking incident information. And yes, our long-term sickness is quite high. It is reasonably similar to other fire and rescue services. Unfortunately, there's been some disruption in the benchmarking of sickness information that the National Fire Chiefs Council have now taken on, which means it's not as useful for us as it used to be, but we're trying to address that. So we're not able to benchmark as well as we used to be able to do so, but we certainly do have plans through the service about managing long-term sickness more effectively to try and drive that down. I don't know if anyone has got any more. Luke?
Can I just come in, Councillor? I think we had our service leadership team meeting yesterday. We had an interesting report from Westfield Health, which is our health provider, sort of a private health provider, which we introduced last year. And during the introduction of that, we did recognise that we were going to see an increase in sickness because people may well go through that route to get their knees, their hips sort of fixed. And we've certainly seen an increase in sickness because of that. We anticipated that and we planned for that, and we're hoping to see a drop in the next 12 months where a business case is going to come back to our SLT in April next year to evaluate whether we keep that system in place. Because we anticipated that, I just want to provide the assurance that although the level is high, we managed to plan around that from a resource perspective, and our appliance availability and the number of trucks being taken off the run because of people being sick and lack of staff has now massively dropped. So our availability has massively increased. So the sickness level is still there, but we're managing our resources in a different way to make sure we're still providing a frontline response.
And just to add to that, we've got very good performance information about exactly what people are off and what reasons for, and for how long, and for which team and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Simon, can I just ask one question about PDRs? It's probably more for Nicola, but getting the tick in the box around the numbers is not necessarily the best way of dealing with this. So can I just check to make sure that the quality of the PDRs is monitored, and that do we get any information, because a PDR is a two-way system, do we pick up any information for councillors to be able to scrutinise how we're getting the information back from our staff? So I can see Nicola's wanting to jump in.
Well, PDRs doesn't sit within employee relations, it sits in workforce development, and so I wouldn't like to sort of speak out of turn, but they would do a dip sample of the PDRs that go back. So I've just done all of my teams. They've been sent back. I would expect if they felt the quality was not up to standard that they would come back and say, you need to have another look at this, or make sure it's a bit more of a robust process, because of course it is a two-way process. That's about as much as I can add at the minute.
Okay.
So, sorry.
Paula?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there is some sampling done on them. For example, I think it was last year they recognised some didn't have SMART objectives, so that was an amendment put in, so it was quite explicit, so to help people in writing them to meet those objectives, so they would align to our CRMP. So we've now got that golden thread a bit more explicit within the PDRs. So there is that assurance done, and they are continually looked at so we can keep improving.
Simon, have we finished with your report now? Thank you very much. I wrote on my notes, are we being effective enough in scrutiny of performance? And I think I've heard an awful lot this morning about we are. So thank you very much, and you, Stephen, as well. So thank you. So shall we move on then? The next item we've got on the agenda is the statement of accounts. I think this has changed a bit from our briefing, because I think you wanted us to see the accounts, but I think that's probably changed a bit. So could you just make sure in governance terms you lay that out for us, please? Thanks, Verity.
Thank you. Yeah, so this paper starts on page 73 of your bundles, and it just gives an update on the 25-26 draft statements of accounts and narrative reports. So in previous years, we've had two different approaches to this, so I checked the legislation to make sure. We have a couple of years ago brought the draft accounts to the Audit Committee and asked for approval before we published them. And the prior year, we didn't do that. We just said to you, we've published them, they're there. And I checked the legislation just to make sure, and there's no requirement for an authority or a subcommittee to approve any draft statements. So this paper really is just an update for you to confirm that we're on track in terms of publishing those accounts. So the background of the paper in section 3 gives you a little bit of the background around the legislative requirements we have for preparing accounts and when they should be published. So at the top of page 74, it's the end of paragraph 3.2, there was a change to the legislation because of delays in audits and things that meant that they have slightly delayed publication dates for local authority accounts. So we have to publish our draft accounts so that they include the first 10 working days of July within the public inspection period, which means you have to publish them by the 30th of June. In the past, that was the 31st of May. So we've had a month delay for a few years. So we have to have published our accounts by the 30th of this month. This paper brings you an update on that. So if we look at the key considerations in section 5, the first paragraph there just says they will be published by the 30th of June. I can confirm they were published on Monday, which means that public inspection period started on Tuesday, so the 23rd of June, and it has to run for 30 working days. So the last day of public inspection will be the 3rd of August. After which point, and towards the end of that period, the audit, so the external audit will start on those draft accounts. So we'll go through the audit process, and then the accounts will be brought back to the audit committee for approval, along with the audit findings, prior to final publication. There's not much else I wanted to say on this paper, really. It was just an update on that. I will just move quickly to the risk section, just to highlight some things that have caused issues in the past. We previously have had audit backlogs in the sector. We are fortunate that we are out of a backlog now. We don't have any old accounts that aren't approved and signed off, so we just have one set of accounts that need to be approved. They need to be completed and signed off by the 31st of January 2027. So there is a risk that the audit is delayed or we don't hit that deadline. The audit plan that Bishop Fleming presented to this committee in March produced a timeline that suggests that they are planning to be on track with that. We've got the audit running between July and September, and an update will come back to this committee in December with the aim of then having the audit completed well in advance of that 31st of January deadline. The other thing that's previously caused delays of receipt of pension information, but we have received all the required pension information for 25-26, so that's all reflected within the draft accounts that have been published. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Very briefly, Chair, just a bit of reassurance, I suppose, Verity. Have you got the resources? The timeline is pretty fierce these days. Have you got the resources to do this? Thanks.
I hope so. We have had, the reason I say that is because our head of finance has recently left, so we're going through a recruitment process. So we are one member of staff down, and depending on how that recruitment process goes, the time period of when we are one resource down kind of depends on that recruitment process. However, the audit, I think we have enough support to get the audit process completed over the next few months. So I don't foresee any delay for the 31st of January deadline. What I have highlighted in here is that the next 2 financial years after that deadline, it comes right back to the end of November, which is back in line with previous deadlines, and that is much tighter. So we do need to make sure that we have that, and actually probably need the auditors to start their work slightly earlier to make sure that we can get that process completed, because it is becoming more time pressured.
I'm looking around the room. I can't see any questions. Can I just ask a question about the external auditors and the quality of the work that they do? Do we do any quality assurance work on the work the external auditors and probably internal auditors do? Because we did set up informal meetings before these meetings with the external auditor once or twice a year, but we don't ask the question back the other way to the operational staff about whether we're getting the quality from our auditors.
From an external audit perspective, we don't have anything formal in place. We don't appoint our auditors ourselves. We go through a public sector audit appointments process, so we were given Bishop Fleming. So far, this is their 3rd year of auditing. They've got a 5-year contract. We as a finance team haven't had any issues with them. We found them to be very responsive, available when we need them to be, doing the work when they say they're going to do the work, and able to keep to time in terms of timescales and stuff. We've signed off all the audits that they have completed on time. So from my perspective, from an external audit, there's been no concerns. I'm not sure from an internal audit whether Helen might want to add anything.
Yeah, so I know that all the internal auditors have their own sort of quality assurance process, don't you, to make sure they're working in line with the guidelines. And then from our perspective, we've got our KPIs and what have you that we check against to ensure that they're moving along the plan at the speed we're expecting, and that responsiveness is as we'd expect, and so on. So we have monthly meetings with them just to from that sort of contract management sort of side. So yeah, we're happy.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that's nice and easy for you. Nobody's going to, it's a report to note. So we'll move on then to the next item, which is the draft annual governance and assurance statement. When HMI came in, it was very clear that they asked me, as the chair of this committee, lots of questions around this. So I think it was really important that actually that we do deal with this effectively as a committee. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to present the draft annual governance and assurance statement for 2025-26. Members of the committee are asked to review and scrutinise the statement. Each year we're required to prepare an annual governance statement under the Accounts and Audit Regulations. The statement sets out how the AFA ensures good governance, provides an assessment of how the governance framework has operated over the previous year, and includes planned improvements to ensure it remains adequate and effective. Also, in accordance with the Fire and Rescue National Framework for England, every fire and rescue service must publish a statement of assurance each year, which provides assurance to the community and the government on financial, governance and operational matters. So the most efficient way to meet both these sets of regulations and not provide too much duplication is through this combined report. You'll note on the legal section in the cover paper, which is page 83 of your pack, that there's been a new addendum to the relevant guidance for annual governance statements. To ensure the approval process is in line with this guidance, we'll be proposing that AGOC continue to scrutinise the statement, both in draft and final format, but that the full AFA provide approval to the final version going forward. So this will be recommended to the AFA in July. So the statement itself can be found on page 85 of your packs. The statement is a summary of the outcomes of an annual review of effectiveness, which is made up of a number of governance reviews and self-assessments. This took place in April, and the planned improvements were set out that were set out in last year's statement to be achieved this year have also been reviewed. There's currently an internal review of Avon Fire and Rescue Service governance arrangements being undertaken. This was commissioned by the service to ensure that governance arrangements are effective, transparent and fit for the future. The project is ongoing from February 26 to January 27, and a revised governance model will be proposed. So to avoid duplication with this activity, we've taken a proportionate approach to the review of effectiveness this year, so it might differ from what you might have seen in previous years for the members. So one of the assessments of our governance framework used mapping against the internal governance and assurance fire standard, cross-reference to the SIP for Solace principles of good governance. There's substantial overlap in these principles with the fire standard, so this approach combined with the wider review of effectiveness gives us a good overview. So you'll note there's an executive summary on page 87, which concluded that at paragraph 1.3 the service has had due regard for the requirements of the Fire and Rescue National Framework. Paragraph 1.7 explains that our self-assessment has not identified any significant governance issues in our arrangements. However, there are issues highlighted relating to pension administration. This is mentioned in paragraph 1.6 and further explained in section 10. These issues are being addressed, but due to the current status of associated investigations, limited information can be provided publicly. Overall, it's been concluded that the governance arrangements are effective, adequate and fit for purpose. It's hard to summarise such a lengthy document, so I just want to draw your attention to a few of the improvements in the commentary, just to demonstrate the breadth of information captured. Section 4, which is from page 90, outlines the governance framework and the structure, as well as explaining how we've improved governance arrangements in the last year and where further improvements can be made. Some examples are improvements in developing a new strategic performance board to support more in-depth discussions about performance, and most notably on governance, the comprehensive review on governance, internal governance arrangements. So that's taken a proactive approach to identifying improvements and ensuring that our arrangements remain effective. Section 5, from page 96, sets out the arrangements in place for transparency, accountability and openness. Section 6 explains our approach to strategic planning. Annual delivery plans were reintroduced last year to support the service in achieving their objectives, and processes have been put in place to strengthen links between the organisation's strategic priorities through to team and individual objectives. Section 7 sets out the arrangements in place for managing performance and our approach to corporate risk management. This is from page 100, if you're trying to keep up with me flying through a very long document. So in line with our commitments made last year in the statement, we've also increased oversight of projects and programmes, supported by a revised project management framework. Section 8, People, Culture and Leadership, provides assurance on the arrangements we have in place to support culture change in the service. Governance has been put in place to ensure accountability and cross-functional ownership of the People, Culture and Leadership programme via a People, Culture and Leadership Committee. And also a new People Services function has brought together all of our people-focused teams to work collaboratively and better support the whole organisation. Section 9, which is from page 107, provides assurance around operational aspects of the service, how we identify foreseeable fire and rescue related risks. The services continue to improve quality of site-specific risk information available to our operational crews. Following a revisit in September, HMIC-FRS acknowledged significant progress has been made in that area. The service's financial arrangements and assurance mechanisms are set out in Section 10. And Section 11, so from page 118, summarises the main external sources of assurance, such as HMIC-FRS, internal audit and external audit. We've heard the head of internal audit's opinion earlier on, which is at page 118. At paragraph 11.8, it's highlighted that we will need to update that paragraph in the final version once we have the external auditor's opinion. 11.9 onwards provides the update on HMIC-FRS, and so with the new report landing this week again, for the final version, that will need to be updated. Section 12 from page 121 highlights ongoing challenges around finances and culture and the potential impact of new legislation and policy on English devolution. It also sets out some significant planned improvements for 26-27. These include further increased assurance mechanisms relating to pension administration, agreeing a revised internal governance model following the current review, continuing to strengthen oversight of our CRMP objectives and continuing to improve that link between objectives at every level, and developing processes around organisational learning, reviewing the way we deliver training and enhancing our performance framework through increasing visibility of local performance indicators. So that concludes the whistle-stop tour of the document. I'm happy to take any questions.
Helen, thank you. That's a really, really effective document and well written. I've just got one major query in my mind, and that's the role of councillors in governance terms, because it's fairly over the top. It doesn't actually mention the role of the scrutiny role of this committee, particularly in great detail, or the role of councillors. Having looked at the potential for the chair of the authority, the 2 weekly meetings that are held with the chief fire officer, and it just struck me that in governance terms we weren't actually making enough about the role of the scrutiny of councillors of the governance of this organisation. So possibly you might like to have a think on that, possibly not this year, but it does strike me that councillors are important. They are the fire authority, that's where the accountability is, and this committee is relevant to that, but also the policy committee is. And it just struck me that it's a really, really good report about the organisation of the officer side of the organisation, but it just was a little bit light in my mind in terms of where you were going. And in 418, you mentioned about the new Strategic Performance Board. I don't know whether there's going to be anybody, any councillor involved with that, but it does strikes me that the performance elements are accountability. It might be perhaps an observer status on that in some way for some councillor to be involved in that. So that's a bit of a big challenge, and I'm looking to my left, no, to my right, sorry, whether Matt would like to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's certainly something we can take away and consider. So we've revised the scorecard, as we spoke about before, we've added some additional key performance metrics in there, and that's obviously based on not only the inspection results, but also our own assessment of our performance. We've put in extra governance internally. So the Strategic Performance Board is an internal governance function. It happens every quarter to take a deep dive into our performance, as well as our monthly review, as well as our one-to-ones. So it's that golden thread that was spoken about earlier by ACFO Lyons, from the Community Risk Management Plan, our strategies, our annual delivery plans, and then how that filters down to individual one-to-ones. It's about making sure we've got effective internal governance as well as external governance and scrutiny. So again, we're carrying out an internal governance review at the moment to strengthen that, and that's kind of highlighted within the HMI report.
Yeah, I suppose it was just the role of councillors in the governance process is, I think, really quite, if everything's going well, we will say well done. If it's not, then there's got to be proper scrutiny there, which I think we exercise in this committee, but also obviously in the policy committee. And it just struck me that perhaps we could, because the only real reference, I think, is about the members, is the terms of reference of members to make sure they're behaving properly, which perhaps after today you might come on to me, but it is an important part of the governance of the organisation. And I read the report thinking it was really great in terms of the progress that's being made internally. It just struck me that there was that bit of a gap.
No, thank you for that feedback. I can take that into account in future iterations. And yeah, I think by linking to the terms of reference, the hope was to sort of keep the document itself sort of short without having to keep repeating myself on stuff that's published elsewhere. But I can certainly take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hal. David, did you want to?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you for your report. So the English Devolution and Community Empowerment Act has passed. I just wondered if there had been any gap analysis done about how that particular piece of legislation might affect any thoughts about our governance arrangements, because I know that there's lots of concepts in that particular act, and a lot of it seems to be being dealt with by the rather murky world of secondary legislation in Westminster. So how is that going to be factored into our governance arrangements, please?
I have to ask if one of the officers can take that one.
Yeah, thank you. So the devolution bill obviously has recently been passed, and it makes reference to fire and rescue services. Obviously, as officers, that's a conversation for MHCLG and for Avon Fire Authority in terms of the direction of travel for our kind of overarching strategic governance. As officers, that's something we can take away and raise at members' briefing to discuss how you would wish us to take forward any piece of work on your behalf. But I am respectful in terms of that's, from an officer perspective, that's straying outside of our kind of position under the Constitution in terms of any strategic governance change at the highest level. And I speak about Fire Authority, that's ultimately for members and for MHCLG and any other interested stakeholders and parties. But I think it's an absolute key point, because it does open up potential transitional change within our highest level of governance for Avon Fire and Rescue Service and Avon Fire Authority.
That was a very careful answer. Thank you, Matt. The reason I made reference earlier on the internal report, where it was talking about the police and fire, it is, I think, a picture that is changing all the time. And we've just got to be aware. I think police commissioners are under threat as well. Which is one of the reasons why I came in on the governance side, because I think councillors can be really nice, but they can also be really quite difficult. And it is important to make sure that scrutiny role is there moving forward. And if it changed, then we'll have to change as well. But I think it was a good question. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Okay, right. So we're moving on now. Then that was once again just for scrutiny, and hopefully we picked up a couple of points. And thank you very much. Very, very good report. So we'll now move on to Jodie. Good morning, Jodie.
Good morning. This is going to be quite a light overview because obviously we have only just started our audits, but I will run through our pack, and I think at the next committee we'll have a lot more to talk about. So we've been in place since April and worked through the first two audits on the audit plan, so 25% through of the plan. In progress at the moment, people services, legislative compliance and data protection. Pleasing to note that people services has actually concluded, and the final report on that has gone out, but that one there will be brought to the committee in the next quarter. Data protection also has come to conclusion, so that one will be finalised and be coming to the next committee as well. And then just really to point out there that the fraud review and the environment management one is also in scoping at the moment, so those ones are up and running. And then in terms of really the only other updates that we've got is the completed actions. So these were the actions that came across from RSM's reviews. So what we've done there is review evidence provided, working with Helen and Elaine, and we've managed to confirm completion of 10 of the audit actions. And that's really all I've got to say, but obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, just a brief question for Jodie. Can you confirm the level of capacity and capability you've got for cyber-related issues within SWAP to give reassurance to the committee? Thanks.
Yeah, so we've got a dedicated IT team and cyber specialists all doing various types of qualifications at the moment. So yeah, no concerns there in terms of capacity, and we do them across several different councils, fire services. Yeah, there's a lot of experience.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Right. So can I thank you? I like the style of the report. It was very clear. You could see where we were on various projects, and I read it with great interest. So thank you very much. Unless anybody's got any questions, once again, that's just for us to note moving forward. Nobody's putting their hand up, so thank you very much. That's very good of you. Thank you, Jodie. So I think we're now back with you, Helen, aren't we?
Yeah, that's right. So this is item 12, an update on the internal audit recommendations, which are still open. This report starts at page 135 of your pack. It has one recommendation, which is to scrutinise the progress made against the internal audit recommendations and management actions. If I can ask members to turn to page 136, you'll see that all audit actions from the years prior to 25-26 have now been closed. There were a few sort of older ones which were still hanging around on your last report, but they've now all been closed. For the 25-26 audit year, of the 28 agreed actions, 16 have now been closed, with the internal auditors verifying closure, as they've said. A further 2 actions have been reported in the appendix as complete pending verification, so that's just due to the timing of getting the reports over there. We have to sort of have a cut-off for verifying closure, but there's 2 more reported as completed within your packs. And then I do have an additional 2 which have since been notified to me as being closed. So that leaves us with just 8 of the 20 from last year in progress. So page 139, Appendix 1, gives you a summary of all those remaining actions. And just for reassurance, because I'm sure somebody will ask, the ones with the May deadlines, which have already passed, have checked on all of those, and they've either been closed or we have a further extension agreed by SLT, so they are all in date. That's my update. If there's any questions, it's quite a positive position, I would say, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Nobody asking. Can I just? I asked Zoe at the start of the meeting whether we should have had the RSM present for this item, but I was assured that it wasn't actually necessary for the committee to have our internal auditors there.
No, so RSM have handed over all of the open actions to SWAP, so they are just as familiar with what we've got open as well, and help us to verify the closure, so that's not necessary.
And that was the answer I got from Zoe, so thank you. So
at least we're consistent. Right, so once again, I think that's the report, and I think that's really good progress, so thank you very much for that report. And we'll now move on to health and safety. Becky.
sorry, I cut off the speaker. We've got to make sure we get the speakers on, so when we're recording the thing. So welcome.
Thank you. You've just reminded me, actually. So I'm here today to present my annual health and safety report, and this is for the financial year April 25 to March 26. So it provides statistics and data on all the health and safety matters that have occurred over the last 12 months. So what I'll do, I'll just go through and give some highlights. If you want to follow along, I'll give you the reference numbers. So I'm going to start at reference number 5.10. So this is an overview of all the data and statistics that we've had within our department over the last 12 months. As you can see, we've had 395 health and safety incidents. That is quite a large jump from the previous year where we had 339. However, that's not always a negative. That's not always a negative thing when you've had an increase in reports. It depends what's been reported, of course, which I'll touch on further down in the report. So if we move on to 5.12, one of the most important things that we look at when we look at the amount of data that we've had is the number of near-miss reports that have been reported on our health and safety platform. And the reason for that is because a near-miss report would be a proactive health and safety report as opposed to reactive. So the higher percentage of near-miss reports you can achieve demonstrates that staff are recognising health and safety issues proactively, reporting them, putting them right. We can listen to that data and then learn from those incidents, put things in place and prevent escalation of further incidents. So I set myself a target of 50%, which Simon touched on. Obviously, we're not quite there just yet. The reason why I set it so high is because if an organisation can reach roughly 50% of near-miss reports out of your entire reports, it's recognised as being at an excellent standard of health and safety. So we are currently at 44%. However, the previous year, so 24 to 25, we were at 31%. So we're about halfway there, which I'm actually really happy with. And 44%, even though we haven't quite met our target, is actually a very, very good percentage. Moving on to section 5.15. This is related to injuries that have occurred over the last 12 months. As you can see from the graph above 5.15, the majority of incidents occur in whole-time personnel, so that's whole-time operational firefighters. And our safety incidents resulting in injuries account for around about 12% of our overall injuries. So whereas I was saying near misses, we try and get to 50%, our current injury stats are 12%. That is also a 2% reduction since 24-25 report. The overall percentage of personnel, so out of all of our personnel within the organisation that suffered an injury that's been reported on our system, is 5.5%, so that is quite small. You'll see in the chart underneath, 5.15, the split of the injuries obtained So this is for operational injuries. So this is the number of hold time from the previous chart. They are split roughly 3 ways. So around about a third of them occur during training, around about a third of them occur operationally, so that's during incidents, and then around about a third of them are related to other activities, so mainly station-based activities. Moving on down now to 5.17. So these are the types of injuries that we get. Strains and sprains is our biggest percentage of injury data, accounting for about 30%. I always try and drill down a little bit more on the highest number of injuries that we get, so the highest areas, and that is actually an 8% reduction from the previous year. Out of those specific number, 6 were an exacerbation of a current injury, so an injury that was made worse while they were at work. And 4 of those were also thought to be not attributed to a work-related activity, so it may have been something that occurred outside of work that has then been exacerbated whilst in work. And then I've also drilled down a little bit on the burns and scalds number, because that appears to be quite high. These are split up because burns and scalds you would automatically assume would occur during fires, but they actually don't. 3 of them were blisterings that came about as a result of BA hot fire training. And 4 of those, actually, which I haven't reported in here, actually occurred in the kitchen. So they were very minor kitchen-related burns. Moving on to 5.18, lost time incidents. This is actually really important data. So these are incidents that have occurred in the workplace that have resulted in personnel having to have time off work. So if you look at the chart that we've got there, you can see it's, with the exception of last year, 24 to 25, the actual number has been on a downward trajectory. Then I move on to 5.20, again demonstrating that it's on a downward trajectory. Of those resulting in lost time, some of those are, they fall under the reporting of RIDOR criteria, which I'll move on to a little bit further in the document. On to number 5.22, serious incidents and serious near misses. So these are more severe incidents that occur in the service. And I'm really pleased to report we actually haven't had one in the last 12 months. In fact, longer than that now, because this report has been, it's sort of 6 weeks old. So we haven't had one since March 2025. So we're coming up to 18 months. In the previous 2 reporting years, we had 5 in the last financial year and 4 in the year before that. And in the 9 years that I've worked here, this is the first year we haven't had any at all, which is really good to report. Moving on to 5.25, so this is our RIDOR reports. This is also one of our KPI statistics. So these are incidents that meet the reporting of a RIDOR report to the HSE. So in this financial year, we've had 5 RIDOR reports. Of those, 4 of them were attributed to over 7 days absence from work. So if somebody has an incident at work that requires them to be off and they're off for over 7 days, or we have to adjust their working pattern for over 7 days, we have to report that to the HSE. Moving on now to the programmes of work that my team's undertaken over the last year. Lots of detail in there, but if we move on down to 5.35, incident investigation, this forms quite a large part of our business as usual, so we put a lot of time and effort into reporting our incidents, investigating them, and then to close the loop in that cycle, making sure we extract some learning and then embedding that back into the service. So in 5.36, so it gives you a bit of an overview of what work we've done with regards to our incident investigation. And then the final part of the report is 5.37, which shows, and this is another one of our KPIs that we report on, we've done a lot of work in endeavouring to close out incidents that have been reported within a 28-day window. And the reason why this is important is because it means that we can capture any learning within a smaller time frame and make sure that that's pushed back through the service, hopefully reducing the themes and number of incidents that we get overall. So our KPI for that statistic is to keep it over 85%, I think. And you can see from the table, I've got quite a lot of quarters in there, just so you can show the journey we've been on. We're currently at 90%, so I'm very comfortable that we've got that quite readily embedded now. And that is everything I wanted to share with you by exception, but I'm happy to take any questions. Sorry, there's a lot of data there.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions? David?
Thanks, Chair. Just to understand, good. Is it a recognised good practice standard or metric that 50% of incidents that are reported should be near misses? Just so I can ask my follow-up question.
Get an understanding on that. Yeah, so that's not a fire service related statistic. That's a general health and safety statistic. It's recognised that having your near miss reports above 50% would give you an excellent health and safety culture.
And the question that follows on from that is, how do you make sure that everyone in the organisation is aware of the importance of reporting near misses? Thanks.
So there is actually some, where did I put it? Sorry, it's flicking through. There's some information in the report about that. So it's more about education, providing a culture where people feel they can report transparently and honestly without any fear of repercussions, and where we will always try and be visible on stations so that we can have those conversations, pick up on points that we know, and then encourage people to report proactively themselves in the future.
Yes, clearly that's in 538, which is in the report, but it was the how that I was trying to understand. And how do you know it's effective?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So the how would be that we obviously monitor the data. We have conversations with people who are perhaps reluctant to make reports. We also have a way of people being able to report something anonymously if they so wish to do so. And for me, it's a statistic that I monitor really closely because it's really important to me. And if we saw it falling, we would have to look at maybe looking at some other ways of implementing some measures to hopefully drive that up. Going forwards as well, we're looking at introducing some good reporting. So our current system only enables us to report near misses and anything that's gone wrong, but I want to add a new section to be able to, for people to report good, recognise good practices, because again that will hopefully improve that culture and just improve that reporting overall. Does that answer your question?
Stephen?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just in addition, through our operational debriefs that our operations crews carry out, following incidents, they complete an operational debrief. And that's an online form, or depending on the size of incident, it's much more structured. There is an opportunity also for them to feedback anything and identify any poor health and safety, which then can be reported. And Becky sits on one of the same committees around our OLAF, it's called, our Organisational Learning and Feedback board, where those reports are then scrutinised by that group, and then if there's any trends, then obviously that is then fed back through, and then training packages are developed and learning's done that way as well. So I think it's important that that correlation from operational incidents as well gets fed back into Becky.
Thank you. Just a comment from me. It was just to try and match the culture in the organisation with health and safety, and clearly you're trying to knit it together, if I can put it that way. So thank you for the explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd already written down the culture, because you actually want issues to be reported. That picks up, if like, the HR issue, that people feel confident enough to be able to do that. This is an annual report. I suppose I just wondered a little bit about the legal responsibility there are for the organisation, the people within the organisation in terms of health and safety. Because, I mean, we are an incredibly vulnerable organisation. You know, we're in difficult situations, but when I looked at it, it just struck me that perhaps there was another dimension we could have added, perhaps in future reports, about where those responsibilities are and how they've been dealt with. Because when I read it, I thought it was really great, but I didn't know whether it's good or bad. And that was my query, because I've got no context in which I'm seeing this in terms of other fire authorities. And I've been reassured by the answers, but just in my mind, I didn't know whether to say this is really good or it's not so good.
Yeah, okay, that's a really good point, actually. Yeah, so prior to coming together with this report, there's actually a lot that feeds into it. So we have a system of quarterly health and safety meetings where ongoing data and themes and trends are fed up through like a chain of health and safety meetings. I've also got my health and safety policy that clearly spells out everybody's responsibilities, legally and otherwise. And yeah, maybe for future reference, I will be a bit clearer about whether it's a positive or a negative.
Thank you.
I mean, you can make of it what you will. The data is the data. You tell me whether it's positive or negative.
Yeah, so please don't take that as a negative comment from me, because I think it's a really good report, but it just I didn't know how good or how bad it actually was. So thank you. Anybody got any other queries? Once again, this is a scrutiny of the report, so thank you very much. And I think lots and lots of really good stuff going on, so thank you, Becky, for that report. Right, so we're now moving on to the other side of that calculation, the whistleblowing report. That's over with you, Nicola.
Hi, thank you. Obviously, as you know, Alison Short's not available.
Do you want me to read out what the title is? Annual Reporting of Whistleblowing Anti-Monitoring.
It's a bit lengthy. So yeah, it's I believe it starts on page 167 of your bundle. So I'll just go through the highlights. So zero tolerance statement has been reissued by Service Leadership Board back in December 2025. I'm just going to move on to the key considerations around 5.1, and just mention that all figures represent cases raised within the last financial year from April 25 up to March 26. In terms of the headings, so whistleblowing, we've had no whistleblowing reports have been received in the last 12 months. Whistleblowing is included within our onboarding process for new employees and is highlighted within both the culture section of the intranet as well as the dignity and respect toolkit. There are detailed frequently asked questions on the intranet for staff to refer to, which include multiple questions and answers about confidential reporting, you know, the process, alternatives and reassurance given on whistleblowing. Moving on to anti-money laundering, there's no reports of any concerns of money laundering have been received. Anti-fraud and anti-corruption, we've had no reports of any concerns around that area either. External complaints, we have had 3 external complaints in the last 12 months that have been received in relation to the conduct of individuals, of members of staff, which does compare to 15 that were received in the previous 12 months, so that's quite a significant reduction, which is obviously good. Employee grievance, so we've had 8 formal grievances were raised, which is a slight increase on the 5 that were raised in the previous year. So, you know, some of them are still ongoing, and some have been finalised. In 5.10, increased efforts to identify and understand trends and learning has taken place, resulting in a 25.5% reduction in average for the resolution time for those in comparison to the year before, which is obviously also good. From a discipline point of view, in 5.12, within the period there were 8 formal discipline cases compared to 6 in the preceding year. Prior to the implementation of the PSB, average discipline case resolution time was 220 days, and since the implementation of PSB, the average case resolution has reduced by over 47% to 116 days. You know, hopefully we can reduce that again in the coming year. An independent review of the effectiveness, impact, governance and value of the Professional Standards Board was undertaken by an external consultancy during March and April of this year. The review gave good assurance around case progression but highlighted areas for improvement around strategic insight and continuous improvement. The findings and recommendations have been accepted by SLB. An implementation plan is currently being developed by Alison Short, Head of People Services, to coordinate and embed the 20 recommended actions for improvement during 26-27. Just to highlight on the risk section that we have appointed another General Counsel who will obviously also help to mitigate any sort of risks to the organisation. And that's the end of the report. Any questions?
Thank you. It's gone very quiet. Yes, sorry, Tim.
That's all right. Just a quick question. I noticed on the grievances raised by employees that they were a 50-50 gender split for male and for female had raised grievances. I was wondering, what is the gender split for our personnel?
Oh, that is a good question.
23%.
Okay, so I mean, we know in the past there's been concerns regarding sort of attitudes and behaviour, particularly, you know, female serving firefighters. And I guess there's a concern, is this pointing to a continued concern within the authority and something that we need to obviously be vigilant about?
I think this data gives us really good insight to work out a strategy going forward. And I know Alison in People Services have got a People Services dashboard ready to utilise all this information. So I haven't spoken to Ali directly, but I've no doubt she's got a strategy to look at this and see if there are any underlying issues that we need to deal with as an organisation.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously the split is different between corporate and operational as well from a female and male perspective. So that's quite telling in the report as well, I think. So yeah, I mean, if there's anything that you want us to report back on, then please let me know and I'll take it back.
Well, I just think, obviously, if senior personnel can, in particular, where these grievances are coming up, double checking of whether or not there is a pattern here or whether or not additional work needs to be done. Particularly, it may be, is this coming up in certain stations or not? That sort of question, really.
I think that's a very, very good question to ask because as councillors we should be challenging this type of issue because I suppose statistically the numbers are quite small, so it's very difficult to pick up trends under those circumstances. Perhaps you have to do the trends over a number of years to actually pick up whether there's particular issues in particular locations. But the other thing that I was fairly keen on is when you've got these and you've got the outgoings and you say ongoing, what we should have a column in there saying what the learning issues that we've learned from those particular grievances or indeed discipline, because it just strikes me that this is an annual report and we'll probably just nod it through. But in terms of what our role as councillors should be, is to make sure that actual fact that the system is responding positively or negatively if it needs to be in terms of the organisation. So I think, yes, we're scrutinising it, but I think in the future perhaps it could be a bit stronger than this report actually indicates.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
David?
Yeah, I'd like to build on your comments, Chair, about the implications of some of the grievances here. In the table on employee discipline on 512, we've got 2 breaches of GDPR, which the outcome was no case to answer. So I'm just wondering if there's a training issue here that we need to address, the fact that people don't understand GDPR properly and they're making accusations that don't actually meet GDPR guidelines. So I just wondered if there's something that there's an acknowledgement need to be made about GDPR training here, please.
Yeah, okay. I think there's some online training for GDPR. So if I can get the report to be amended to have the outcomes on there, then hopefully that will give you the reassurance that you might need that those issues are resolved moving forward.
Yeah, I understand the question was around GDPR, but I think we need to look wider and look at all the underlying reasons. And we do have case reviews following disciplines, and then that feeds back into organisational learning and outcomes from that.
David?
Can I ask a question about the whistleblowing? On the face of it, zero reports on whistleblowing is positive, let's say. But you could interpret it another way, that the people within the organisation don't have confidence in the process. How does the organisation know that the whole of the organisation has confidence in the process that they will be able to bring forward anything under whistleblowing? It looks positive on the face of it, but I think it's important that the committee just prods that and just gets an answer to that. It might be something that perhaps the chief wants to chief fire officer wants to answer. I don't know, but I think it's a question that we should ask.
I absolutely agree. I'm always nervous when there's no whistleblowing in any organisation. There's no indication that we've got independent people that people can go to in terms of whistleblowing. And I hope we're not just being negative for the point of being negative. But Matt, I do think this is something we need to perhaps think a little bit more about in the future, because the history of Avon Fire Authority has been difficult. And it is important that moving forward that we as councillors do, and our independent member do, in actual fact, scrutinise this perhaps a little bit differently in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Just checking my mic was on. Apologies. Absolutely, we're not complacent in this area. I think what I'm hearing from members is to do a thematic review and do more of a deep dive into these areas, which we'll take away. Just for reassurance, on page 49 of His Majesty's Inspection Report, it does talk about individual members of staff, representative bodies and staff network groups that they spoke to, gave examples where they'd raised legitimate concerns with leaders and the service had been active in resolving them. So, there's one metric in terms of people being confident to raise concerns, and we've spoken about that today, whether it be a health and safety concern or a grievance or whatever it may be. We want to ensure that our workforce is confident that they can raise concerns and that they'll be dealt with in the appropriate way. Now, the outcome might not be the outcome that someone might, because sometimes it is from perspective, but what they need to have trust and confidence in the process, and that everything will be dealt with seriously and be acted on. So I'm confident that the inspection has picked up on that based on the people they've spoken to. There's evidence in the report that's been presented today that people are raising grievances, which is a good thing in an organisation, but we mustn't be complacent. We must look at the thematic analysis of those metrics and make sure that where we identify improvements, we make those improvements. So we'll take that away. Thank you for the question and for the scrutiny.
And I think it's important in terms of the minutes that this challenge has come today, because I think it is important that we actually take our responsibilities as councillors and the independent members to scrutinise these reports in that way. So thank you very much. I'm sorry if that seems a bit negative, but thank you very much for your report. Anybody else got any further queries? Shall we move on then? So I think we're now coming to the one. I did ask at one stage to put up the agenda, but we seem to always put you near the end order. But thank you very much. Over to you now.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. So today I'm presenting this paper for scrutiny. It's the exception report for the Corporate Risk Register. Obviously, every other meeting you have the full Corporate Risk Register. Today is the exception. So the tables present a summary. As you know, risk owners regularly monitor and report on the risk events that sit within their remit. The current score, which is presented in the summary tables today, is calculated based on their evaluation of how effective their existing controls are working to mitigate against likelihood and or impact within the current risk environment. They also provide details of any planned actions with dates associated with those and any other contextual factors that would be relevant to the management of their risk in their areas. So on page 174, which is the second page of the exception report, paragraph under section 5 give the current position of corporate risks in the service. Section 5.6 presents 3 corporate risk events that have current scores that are out of tolerance or in the red, if you like, starting with CRO 2.2 under prevention and protection, which is ineffective data to develop and support a risk-based approach for business fire safety. Now, this risk event was previously reported to this committee at a score within tolerance, but as detailed in the narrative, this risk is now, has now been increased and is subject to regular scrutiny against improved compliance mechanisms and a very detailed and thoroughly regulated action plan. So this score should see a reduction by the end of this year or early into next year. And in a moment when I finish, if you've got any questions, then we've got the lovely Steve here that can answer those for you. Turning on to the top of page 175, under response and rescue, we've got CRO 3.3, loss of USAR capability. This score remains at 18, as was previously reported to this committee back in March. And as the latest position explains, the progress that's been made towards USAR compliance is really positive, and there's lots more detail, and the SLT will be further scrutinising that at the end of July. But we can't reduce the score until the positive actions have been fully embedded, which will lead to the score reduction probably into next year. We need new members of staff to be fully trained and on board, and the other progress points that have been made. So, and that's very similar as well for the third risk event that are in the red, which is under CRO 4.5, significant increase in sickness, absence and modified duties. Again, there's lots of progress being underway to look at improvement and reduction of this risk score, but that score will not be reduced prematurely until we can see that the actions have been embedded. And obviously sickness and modified duties was discussed earlier in relation to performance. So you can be reassured that there's ongoing scrutiny and an action plan in place. At the bottom of page 175, under section 5.7, there are 3 pension risk events that have been reported up from the combined pensions raid log. Now, this is a change for you, and this is a change going forward that was agreed by the SLT in terms of pension risk reporting that's been introduced, which is why I added an appendix 2 to the report to give you the rationale that went to SLT to agree this. And this was aimed at reducing duplication, to focus the prioritisation and strengthen scrutiny. So you've got the rationale there, and happy to address any questions at the end. But this now means that it's a slight change to what you last saw in relation to pensions back in March AGOC. So these are now coming up with a slightly different sort of risk matrix and risk level descriptions. But nonetheless, we are now reporting up with the high and the critical pension risks that are on that combined pensions raid log. So if you've got any questions at the end, I'm happy to address those. On the bottom of page 176 in 5.8, there's a summary of a risk score increase for business continuity risk, CR 18.1, failure to plan and prepare for known risk. And again, the narrative explains that. And then on page 177, section 5.9 presents the 3 risk events which have recently been removed from the corporate risk register. There are 2 CRO5 procurement risk events that have been de-escalated to be managed at a local level within the procurement team. And then CR 19.2 has been removed due to the time frame that aligned with the efficiencies and savings programme coming to an end, which was in March of this year. So financial efficiencies will now be managed under CR 20 going forward, and you'll see that in September meeting when you get the full corporate risk register. So that was a very quick to keep within time, but thank you for listening. I'd like to open up to any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorna. I can't see any hands going up. Can I just ask, when HMI came in, they were asking me questions about this, and they were indicating that it's excellent in Avon Fire Authority in comparison to other fire authorities. So great credit to you and the team for making sure that this is right. Can I just ask, around the risk appetite, how do you work that out in the first place? Does that come here, or is that an officer-based approach that's in the system?
So the Service Leadership Board first set the risk appetite and tolerance levels for the 15 categories of risk that sit within the Corporate Risk Register, and they did that over 2 years ago now, and then it's been reviewed twice since then. And back in November, the Service Leadership Board reviewed it for the third time, but actually asked for it to go to the Service Leadership team. So the board reviewed it, and then in December it went to the Service Leadership team, who then reviewed and made some changes. And there were some categories that were made slightly more risk averse. Safety was sort of made more strict, so safety risks go out of tolerance at an earlier score now. As were people, we introduced a culture riskometer. Environmental was added to it, and then there were a couple that were made less risk averse. So they're constantly changed, and they're reviewed on an annual basis. But it might well be, from a sort of a recommendation point of view with regards to risk appetite and tolerance, that actually going forward we do engage the fire authority in analysing and scrutinising whether they're happy with the risk appetite and tolerance levels in the way in which they're set. But we've also got plans for further improvement with the Corporate Risk Register going forward in relation to more integrated risk management approach, more management of risks at a local level and reporting it by exception, perhaps a framework more towards sort of an enterprise risk management approach. So there will be more changes afoot, and we'll need to amend the risk appetite and tolerance approach in line with that. So I'll no doubt be coming to you within the next sort of financial year to look at your approval and scrutiny of some of the improvements we're going to make. But risk appetite and tolerance, it may well be that we should engage you in that as well.
I don't think I was volunteering.
I thought you were.
No, but I mean, I think it's right that we should be asking that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other issue is when you've got a risk register, it's making sure that people actually respond quickly when you've got queries. I can't see anywhere where we actually record whether these risks are out of date and how they're being responded to, because you're running the system, but the responsibility is quite obviously with the operational managers. And it was just that those three risks, the big ones, are we getting the right response from people within the organisation?
Yes, so
you're not going to say no.
No, obviously not. No, but well, I would. I'd be quite honest. Actually.
Yes, I'm sure you would.
But no. In terms of the risk owners and the managers, it's not just. It very much isn't just a tick box exercise that they have to update because it's part of a report that's going to a meeting. It very much forms part of their weekly, sometimes even daily engagement. I mean, I know for a fact Steve and the other area managers actually their regular one-to-ones with their line managers, they actually use data, performance data, KPIs, key risk indicators, and they use their corporate risk events as a form of sort of performance management and decision making, as it should be, so that it drives decision. So it's not just that it's that it's sort of reactive, that we use it in a proactive way. So for sure, definitely reassure you on that. And that's partly why there have been, over the last sort of year, 18 months, and there will continue to be some of the risk events de-escalating, because actually we don't need risk events that aren't helping with performance and improvement to be on the corporate risk register. They can be managed at a local level, and that we're looking at the right things and using them meaningfully. So yeah. I'm not saying we're perfect, but we will continue to do our best.
I feel very proud of the system that we've got, so thank you very much. Nobody else has got any queries on that. We're coming now towards the end of the public meeting, but there's a couple of items that have to go into private session. Just to remind everybody that the next meeting is Wednesday the 23rd of September at
10:30. Can I just give my apologies? I will now need to leave for my next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Right, so at this stage, I think we want to exclude the public.
Stop the recording first, Chair.
Sorry, hang on a sec. I've got to read it out first, haven't I? Just to make sure we do it correctly. Resolved that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business on the grounds that they contain exempt information pursuant to Schedule 12A, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972, and that in accordance with the Schedule 12A, Part 2, Paragraph 10 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. We do need to have a vote on that. So is anybody against that?
You need to propose and second it.
Oh, you need a proposer and seconder. I'll propose it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew
No,
seconded it, I think. So those against? Yeah, I know. And me. Anybody wish to abstain? Those in favour? Right, that's unanimous. Thank you very much.